Hello, everyone. This is Ace, and this is another episode of this channel, Ace the Exam. And at the same time, this is the second episode of this channel in the section of TOEFL listening. And in this episode, we are going to work out a lecture in the area of art history. Listening is a challenging task for many test takers, and if you take a TOEFL exam, you'll encounter it on other tasks too, like speaking and writing, except for reading. I have always been bombarded with a myriad of questions from my students that how to pass successfully this test, how to get a upper 25 score. They always tell me, uh, we watch movies and TV shows and we understand them completely, but when it comes to listening to a TOEFL task, we answer we don't understand, or some of them say that we understand the lecture completely, we understand what the professor says, but we answer the following questions incorrectly. This is true. You will encounter such questions in the when you teach TOEFL, because TOEFL listening is not what about. It is not just about the content. You should also pay attention to the stance and attitudes. For example, in a TOEFL lecture, you may listen. The professor talks about, say, relativity theory in physics, and you completely understand the relativity theory, what the professor says, but you don't pay attention the professor's stance, the student's stance when asking questions, the professor's opinion while authoring pieces of information. So, in the question section after listening, you may not be asked about the details of the theory. Instead, you may be asked about the professor's attitude. So it goes without saying that you answer the question incorrectly because you didn't pay attention to this. And this is your weakest spot. This is your Achilles heel in your listening ability. And you should improve it, you should enhance it, and get the better of it. And the key to this, I believe, is listening interactively. Some students practice note taking, but note taking is not the solution. When the listening begins, they constantly take notes. But how can they follow a conversation or lecture completely while just taking notes? When taking notes, you also divide your attention and allocate a part of your attention to what you read, to jotting down, to note taking. Instead, you should allocate your whole focus to the listening. So, how can you pass successfully this task? How can you get upper 25 when you constantly take notes? Um, I don't say that this is impossible, but this is difficult. Instead, you can be interactive by expressing the word interaction. I mean, uh, while absorbing information, perceive them and tell yourself what the professor said, what the student and what the student said in the conversation, and so on. Just tell yourself what happened while absorbing information, and this interaction also makes the listening task interesting for you. For example, you nod your head and it makes you nod your head while you absorb information, while you understand what happened, and this makes the practice, this makes the task delightful for you. This way you turn the drudgery of learning into sheer enjoyment. And this is what I'm going to do in this episode. And I'm going to teach you how to be interactive. As usual, we begin this episode by firstly cite an old Chinese proverb. If you give a man a fish, he would eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he would eat for a lifetime. Now we begin this episode.
Listen to part of a lecture in an art history class.
Last class, I passed out your assignment for your first paper, and today I want to spend some time going over it. Most people never take any art history until they get to college, so many of you have probably never written an art history paper before. I gave you a list of appropriate works of art for you to write about. So your next step in this process needs to be to go look at the work you've selected as your topic, and bring a pencil and a notepad with you, because I don't mean you should just drop by at the museum and glance at it so you can say you've seen it in real life. You need to go and sit in front of the work and really look at it, carefully and slowly, and keep careful notes about what you see. You'll need them for the kind of art history paper you're going to be writing. It's what we call a formal analysis.
All right, we just listened to the first 56 seconds of this listening task, and we understand that the professor is talking about an assignment, but this is not a usual assignment. This is a particular assignment. He began his lecture by saying that in the last class, I passed out to you your assignment. And pass out has a common meaning, to become unconscious, but it also has other meanings too, like to distribute, to hand out, to give out. And if you don't know the other meaning of pass out, you can look at the combination of words, pass out, assignment, and pay close attention to the preposition of out in the phrasal verb, pass out. You can easily understand that this pass out means to hand out, to give out, to distribute. In the following, the professor talks about the steps of doing the assignment and how students can carry out their assignment. But what is this assignment? This assignment, according to the professor, is a list of artworks that students choose artworks from. And those artworks are the subject of their study. And we understand that this assignment is a writing one. They are going to write about their chosen artworks. But what they are going to do for this writing, this is what the professor mentions in the following. He says that students are going to a museum, but this is not a common visit. They are going to see carefully and closely their chosen pieces of art in the museum. And by mentioning to look at slowly, he means that students should never let any details about their chosen artworks escape their attention. And we infer that students are going to a museum because the professor says, I don't want you to just drop by the museum. Just pay attention to the article "the" before the museum that the professor says. And this means that students are familiar with this museum. They know that they are going to this museum, and this museum is predetermined. In the last seconds of this part, the professor asks students to bring with themselves a notepad and a pencil because they are going to take notes about their chosen artworks. While visiting their chosen artworks closely, they are going to jot down notes about the artworks. And the professor, in the last seconds of this part, says that these notes are important because the students are going to use them to write a formal analysis. And when he mentions formal analysis, this part ends. Perhaps in the following, we are going to listen to what formal analysis is, how important it is, and things the like.
Analysis. A formal analysis of a work of art, any kind of art, is based on its formal qualities, which means qualities related to the form, things like color, texture, line, shapes, proportion, and composition.
All right, we listened to the next 18 seconds of this task. Here in this part, we understood that what does the professor mean with the expression of formal. According to the professor, formal here does not mean polite or ceremonial, proper, solemn, strict, academic, legal, polite, or decorous. No, formal here does mean qualities related to form. Formal here does mean form related, related to form. But what is this form? Form is made up of some qualities, qualities like color, texture, line, shape, proportion, and composition. And these attributes together define form, define what form is. And this is what professor imparts to you as a student sitting in the class. All right. We continue listening to the next part of this listening task.
Now, probably the closest thing to a formal analysis you might have written is for an English class. If you've, say, written an analysis of a poem, you've used the same skills. You've given an analysis of the poem by describing and analyzing its form and meter. A formal analysis paper in art history is very similar.
All right, we listened to another piece of this task. In the previous part, we understood what does the professor mean with mentioning formal. Formal means form related or related to form. And here the professor talks about the initial experience and initial familiarity of the students in the class, including you as someone who has imagined himself or herself as a student in the class, with formal analysis. Actually, the professor in this part talks with the students in order to address their concerns with the strangeness of the assignment that they are going to undertake. He tries to draw a parallel between what students are going to do in this class and what they did in the past in English class. And in English class, students analyzed literature contents, for example, poems. And the professor says the kind of analysis that they gave for, say, poems is quite similar to what they are going to do in this class. An interesting point in this part is that the professor used the word say during his lecture within this part. Then he wants to mention an example. And say as you know, as a verb means to speak, to talk, but it also has other uses. And one of its application is to mention an example. Uh, you know, the professor states that if you say have written, and say here means if you, for example, have written. Say in this use of say, this application of say is common in speaking, and you may encounter it frequently in the listening task, in the TOEFL listening task. So I thought it is worth mentioning it because it is important. Again, we listen to the next part of this task.
Similar. Now, before you begin writing your formal analysis, you'll want to start with a summary of the overall appearance of the work, a brief description of what you see. Either figures, people, what are they doing? Or is it a landscape? Or an abstract representation of something? Tell what the subject is, and what aspects are emphasized in the painting. This will give your reader an overview of what the work looks like before you analyze it.
All right, we listen to the next 30 seconds of this task, and in this part, the professor talks about the crucial step to take before writing a formal analysis, and that is to gain a brief description of the artwork, to gain an overview of the artwork. And according to the professor, the subject of the artwork can help us to reach such a description. He says if the subject is people, we should ask what do people do in the representation. If the subject is landscape, what landscape it is. We ask similarly if the subject of the artwork is an abstract representation of an object. Regarding the professor words, we should pay attention to what is pronounced, what is emphasized in the artwork. And that point of emphasis helps us reach an overview of the artwork. And this is a crucial step before writing a formal analysis. Again, we'll listen to the next part of this listening task.
The next part of your paper, the actual formal analysis, will be the longest and most important section of your paper, where you describe and analyze individual design elements.
Okay, this part was clear, and it was an introduction to the actual formal analysis, which is the longest portion of a formal analysis and the most important part of a formal analysis, and it discusses individual design elements. But what are individual design elements? Can you remember what individual design elements are? According to the earlier part of this lecture, individual design elements are qualities like lines, shapes, composition, combination, color, texture, and so on. I guess in the following, the professor will talk about how to write this significant portion of a formal analysis. Because remember, this lecture, the purpose of this lecture is to instruct the students how to write a formal analysis, how to write a special assignment, and that assignment is writing a formal analysis. All right, we continue listening to the rest of this task.
For this portion of the paper, you're going to rely on the notes you took at the museum, because you should be able to describe in detail the design elements the artist uses and how they are used. For example, does the artist use harsh lines or soft lines? Are the colors bright or muted? Focus on the design elements that you feel are most strongly represented in that particular work of art.
Okay, we guessed correctly, and in this piece, the professor talked about how to write the main portion of a formal analysis correctly. And the clues of the professor to offer to the students are to use their notes, the notes that in the earlier parts the professor recommended the students of using them, of bringing pencil and notepad, and to focus on aspects or elements of an artwork that are bold, that are strongly represented. For example, has the other used harsh line or soft line, harsh texture or soft texture? Are colors muted or bright? If you don't know the meaning of muted when the professor said muted, you can look at the conjunction between bright and muted, and the previous conjunction between harsh and soft. Definitely, you know the meanings of harsh and soft. They are antonyms of each other. So, since they are connected with the coordinating conjunction of and, so we will have a parallel. And in the combination of bright and muted, again, you know the meaning of bright. In the combination of bright and muted, definitely muted means less bright. They are, and we guess that they are, we guess correctly that they are antonyms of each other. And don't forget that the professor recommended the students to use their notes to describe the design elements in detail. Not somewhat, not slightly, in detail. To describe elements in detail. We continue listening.
Of art. And if you don't know where to begin, take note of where your eye goes first. Then describe things in the order in which your eye moves around the work. This will help you understand how one part relates to another, the interaction between the different parts of the work. Okay? This kind of analysis should occur throughout the main portion of the paper.
All right, this piece, like the previous part, was scalier, and it was in the wake of, in the following of that part. In the previous part, the professor recommended the students to focus on elements of an artwork that are strongly represented in order to write in details the main portion of their formal analysis. And in this part, the professor offers hints to students to how to focus items that are strongly represented. And the professor's recommendation is to pay attention to where your eyes go first and relate elements according to the sequence of your eye movements, where your eyes go next. All right, we continue listening to the rest of this listening task.
Last section of your paper, and this goes beyond formal analysis, you comment on the significance of what you've seen. What details of the work convey meaning? Some significant details will not be apparent to you right away, but if you look long enough, you realize how important they are for your interpretation of the work. Many years ago, I was writing a formal analysis of a painting of a little boy. In the painting, a little boy was standing in his nursery, and he was holding a toy bird in his hand, and there were more toys around him in the background of the painting. Because of the bird he was holding, I assumed at first that the painting was about the innocence of children. But as I looked at the painting longer, I realized that the boy's eyes looked sad, even though there was no discernible expression on his face. And then it dawned on me that even though he was surrounded by toys, he was all alone in his nursery. The boy's eyes were a significant detail in the painting that I didn't notice at first.
We listen to the last piece of this listening task, and in this part, the professor talks about the last section of a formal analysis. And this last section of formal analysis is to draw meaning of an artwork, to draw meaning from details of an artwork. And this draw meaning practice, according to the professor, goes beyond the formal analysis itself. To go beyond something means to take significance, to take more significance than something, or to become more important than something. So now we understood that this draw meaning practice is the most important part of the formal analysis. And the professor mentions that some details of an artwork are apparent to the viewers, to the students, as those who are undertaking the assignment of looking carefully at artworks and writing a formal analysis for. And some details are not immediately apparent to the students. And for this part, for details that are not immediate apparent, the professor has a hint for students, and he says that students should look long enough at their chosen artwork to understand the meaning of details. And for this, he also mentioned a personal example. He says that years ago he visited a painting, and in this painting there was a boy surrounded by toys, and this boy holds a bird, a toy bird in his hand. And since bird is the token of innocence, firstly the professor thought that the painting is about the innocence of children. But after looking long enough at the picture, the professor notices the sadness in the boy's eyes, and then he understood that the painting is about the loneliness of children. Although the children is surrounded by many toys, but he feels lonely. And during this piece, the professor uses the phrasal verb of to dawn on someone. It dawns on me. To dawn on someone means to become apparent to someone. And if you don't know the meaning of dawn on someone, you don't need to be daunted. You don't need to be confused and hopeless. You should infer the meaning from from what the professor said earlier in this part about the details to become apparent. So you can infer that to dawn on someone means to become apparent to someone. Now we finished analyzing this task, and we are going to answer the questions.
What point does the professor make about the writing of a formal analysis in art history?
This is question one, and as usual, our general strategy for answering TOEFL questions is to reject the incorrect options, thereby isolating the correct one. With this in mind, we check the options. The first option, it's objective. It's here is a pronoun that refers to the writing of a formal analysis. This noun phrase, the writing of a formal analysis. Its objective is to identify common features of several works of art. No, it has not been discussed in the listening task that the purpose of writing a formal analysis is to identify common features of several artworks. No, Each student has chosen a specific artwork, and they are they are just write about their chosen artwork, and they don't want to discuss the common features of several artworks. No, each student there is just one piece of art to discuss, to write about. So this option is clearly rejected. Option two, its most important part is the explanation of an artwork's significance. According to the lecture, the most important part of an artwork is to explain the meaning of an artwork, to draw the meaning of an artwork, and the meaning of its details, its design elements. As the professor mentioned, the instance of a picture showing a boy and a toy bird in its hand. But this option is incorrect. However, it is tricky and it may trip you up, and you may mistakenly choose this option as the correct one, because if in this option you replace the word significance with the word, say, meaning, this option can be correct. So be careful what options you reject, and what option you settle for as the correct one. Option 3. Several styles of writing a formal analysis are used by art historians. This option is clearly rejected because in the lecture, the professor discussed just one style of writing a formal analysis, and that style was in steps. Please don't misunderstand, don't mistake the options in a style with the number of styles of writing a formal analysis. No, in the lecture, the professor mentioned just one style of a formal analysis, and that style was in steps. Step one was to write a summary about the artwork. Step two is discussing the details and design elements of that artwork, and step three was drawing the meanings of those design elements. We reached option 4, and since we rejected the previous 3 options, this option appears as the correct one. But in order to make sure about the correctness of this option, we check it. A particular approach is required to present information about an artwork. Exactly. This is the same thing that the professor made about the writing of a formal analysis in art history. As I just cited for option 3, this particular approach is a step-like approach. In step 1, you cite a summary for an artwork. In step 2, you mention the details and design elements. And in step 3, you draw the meanings of those details and elements. This specific approach to write a formal analysis that the professor discusses in the lecture. This is option 4 is the correct one.
According to the professor, what will students need to do before writing the art history paper?
This is a factual question, and we check the options. The first one, look at examples of formal analysis in textbooks. No, it has not been mentioned in the lecture that the students need to look at examples of formal analysis in textbooks before writing the art history paper. The only example that the professor mentioned regarding this issue was that the professor wanted to remind students of similar activity where they joined English class and they wrote analytical papers about poems. This was the only example that the professor mentioned in order to address the concern of the students regarding the assignment. However, the professor never mentioned this, that students are forced to look at examples of formal analysis in textbooks. No, this option is clearly rejected. Option 2, take notes on the artwork they will write about. This option seems correct because the professor, the first thing that the professor mentioned regarding the assignment was that the students should bring with themselves pencil and notepad and look closely at their chosen artworks and take notes. So we keep this option as the candidate for the answer to the question and check the rest two options. Option 3, go to different museums before selecting a topic for the paper. It has not been mentioned in the lecture, and students, according to what we inferred from the professor, we understood that all students will go to just one museum because once in the first minutes of the lecture, the professor mentions that I don't want you to just drop by the museum, and the article the before museum means that students will visit only one museum. So again, this option is clearly rejected. The last one, study the historical context of the artwork they will write about. No, this option has never been mentioned in the lecture, and therefore we reject it. And we settle for option 2 as the answer to this question.
Why does the professor mention an English class?
This is a factual question. In order to answer, we check the options. Option 1, to explain the difference between visual language and written language. No, this option is rejected because the professor never mentioned visual language and written language. The professor mentioned an English class to get across this point to the students that they are familiar with the assignment. They are familiar with writing a formal analysis, and he wanted to say that they have done so when they attend an English class and analyzed poems in their papers. So this option is rejected. The second one, to explain that the students need good writing skills for their assignment. Again, this option is rejected, and we mentioned the purpose of this attempt on the professor's part. He wanted to address the students' concern for the assignment, and he wanted to remind them of doing something similar, carrying out a similar assignment, similar to writing a formal analysis, I mean. The third option, to point out similarities between a poetry paper and the student's assignment. Yeah, this is the point, and this was just what we mentioned. He wanted to draw a parallel between writing paper for poetry in English class and the assignment the students are going to do in the professor's class. And also, we checked the last option to point out that many art historians become writers. No, this option is rejected. It has not been mentioned in the lecture, and the professor never said this. Yeah. Okay. Option three is the answer to the question.
What does the professor recommend as a way to understand the relationship between different parts of an artwork?
If you want clues to answer the questions, you can go back to the lecture where the professor talks about how eye movement can help students to relate different aspects of an artwork. The professor mentioned that if you have difficulty in focusing on design elements, on details, on aspects of your chosen artwork, you should first take notes about where you should look at this, where your eyes go first, and take notes about that aspect of the artwork, and then relate design elements, relate details to each other according to the movement of your eyes, where your eyes go next. This way, you can relate, according to the professor, this way you can relate different aspects of an artwork. And this was the clue to answer the question. And with this in mind, we checked the options. Option one, looking for lines that connect different parts of the work. The only place in the lecture that the professor mentioned the word lines was when he wanted to mention examples of design elements in order for the students to understand its meaning. And no, the professor never mentioned that the students should look for lines. No, he, as I just said earlier, he mentioned that the students should pay attention to where their eyes go. The sequence of their eye movements is what the professor offered to the students as a clue for relating different parts of the work. This option is clearly rejected accordingly. Option two, examining the artwork from several different angles. The professor never mentioned this during his lecture, so it is rejected. Option three, looking for similar colors that artists used throughout the work. Again, this option has not been mentioned in the lecture, so it is rejected. And the last ones, now that we rejected the first three options, it is clear that the last option is the answer, but we check it. The last option, determining how the viewer's eyes move around the work. Yeah, this was, as I said earlier, this is the answer to the question, and the viewer's eye movement can offer the viewer to can offer the viewer a way to relate different aspects of the artwork. This option is the answer to the question.
The professor describes 3 sections the art history paper should contain. Place them in the order in which they should appear in the paper.
This is a timeline question, a type of common question on the TOEFL exam, which asks you to place the options in order of their occurrence, in order of in the chronological order, according to the time they happened. And if we go back to the lecture, we can go over what the professor said. Firstly, the professor mentioned that in order to write the formal analysis, students should offer a summary, an overview, and give an overview of the artwork. So this is the first section. In the second part, which is the longest part of the formal analysis, according to the professor, students need to write about the design elements, the details of the artwork. And in the third part of the formal analysis, that is the most important part of it, the students need to interpret, to draw the meanings of details, to draw the meaning of the artwork. Accordingly, we place option C first because it is going to be mentioned firstly, then option A, and lastly option B.
Why does the professor talk about his own experience analyzing the painting of a little boy?
The professor mentioned this personal experience of visiting the picture of the boy surrounded by toys in order to recommend the students for looking long enough at their chosen artwork for the hidden meaning of that artwork to be apparent to them. Firstly, he cited that sometimes the meaning of details, the meaning of an artwork is not clear to them immediately. So for this, they should look at the artwork for a long period. And then he mentioned his personal experience. All right, this in mind, we check the options. Does the professor mention this personal experience to point out a common misconception about formal analysis? No. The professor mentioned this example, this experience when he discussed the third or equally the last section of formal analysis, that is the meaning of the artwork. And the professor and that part was not a room for mentioning any misconception, and the professor never pointed out any misconception during his lecture. Therefore, we reject option A. Option 2, to stress the importance of looking at an artwork thoroughly. This option seems correct, and this was exactly what I mentioned earlier for answering this question. And we continue checking the remaining options. Option 3, to show why a formal analysis should not emphasize small details. This is the other way around of what the professor emphasized in the lecture. If you listen again to the lecture, you will see that the professor emphasizes the details, the design elements, and their meanings, their hidden meanings. Therefore, we reject this option. And the last one, to provide an example of an artwork that is easy to analyze. No, the professor never mentioned his personal experience to demonstrate that some artworks are easy to analyze. No. By the way, the painting that the professor visited was a difficult one. According to the professor, was a difficult one to analyze because firstly, the professor thought that the author of the painting has painted this painting to demonstrate the innocence of children. But after looking at the picture for long enough, the professor understood that the intent of the author is to demonstrate the loneliness of the children. So this option is rejected and we choose option 2 as the correct one.